Good Mistress Arda. Silisvaff stood in front of the window with a cigarette between his fingers and watched, peeved, as the lines of cars flowed along the street. The window was in a strange place, under the edge of the ceiling, as if they lived on the basement floor. But it was not so, just the opposite, in fact. A little rented hole beneath the roof, in which the ceiling was unnaturally low, but somehow not slanted. The view that opened from the window was a gorgeous, expansive panorama of a traffic hub, which had a unique worth in winter when it was dark all the time. The lights of the metropolis shined somehow majestically and inspiringly from there. Yet, in the summer's last quarter, the place's charms had all run out on him. The air was muggy from the pile of unwashed clothes and the mould in the bathroom, and the sink drain was blocked. He'd even begged a friend or two. You don't happen to have, like, a wire rope for unclogging a bathroom drain, do you? The kind that's long and there's a crank at one end. What? No, it's not actually for the toilet, just the sink drain. When they recommended drain cleaner, he responded haughtily, "Drain cleaner is for the weak." He thought a bit, and then specified, "There's a little pipe inside the big pipe, and the pipe gets blocked from under the floor, and then the bigger pipe starts overflowing, and it was a hell of a good system until I poured some leftover buckwheat down it." Anyway, it's all fucked, Silisvaff thought mournfully. Got to get out of here. Good ideas came as if from themselves. Wait. Old Arda Nosek. Wouldn't want to pester Pani Zofia. Been there, done that anyway. Pani Nosek is a whole different story. She'd actually be happy if I went and saw her, and maybe just bring up in passing that I need a little layover spot. Can't be worse than this blasted rental hell. Good Mistress Arda lived alone. Her children had grown up, and she and her husband had split up the honest way. She was a widow. She passed her days in quiet busying. Sometimes she chopped a little wood in the yard, or picked around a bit in the garden, cleaned rooms, and looked at old photos in the evenings. She didn't spend much on food, because food no longer offered her any joy. She made semolina porridge in the morning, a 2-egg omelette in the evening, and she often forgot to make anything at all. Good Mistress Nosek loved coffee, and saw to it that there would always be creamer at home. She didn't care too much for sugar, which she used only on the rare guest. Everything went exactly according to plan. Mistress Nosek was at home. Where else than at home could she have been? Pushing around in the garden, she wiped her hands on the end of her skirt and gave Silisvaff a hello. "Well, Silisvaff, what brings you here? How are things? Haven't gotten married?" "No, Arda love, I haven't. And life's wonky. My lease is ending, and pretty soon I won't have anywhere to live. I was meant to get a room in a month, but meantime I don't have a place to be." Arda thought. She was not some stupid old woman. Let Silisvaff do a little renovating in exchange for room and board. There'd be somebody to share a word or two. She could fry potatoes for two. What's the point peeling and braising a potato alone? They went and sat in the kitchen, and Silisvaff talked, and Arda nodded and listened. When the conversation got around to the room, Arda got up and opened the door to it. Jesus Christ, it was floor to ceiling with stuff. Why doesn't she throw some of her shit out, Silisvaff thought. Could make a fire in the garden. "I have one empty room, but I have things in there. If you set it in order, then you can certainly be here for a month," Good Mistress Nosek said, graciously. "I want white walls and a pot of white lilies on the windowsill," Silisvaff said. "Let's clean up, organise, paint the walls. I can buy the paint myself. Can you set your dresser up somewhere else? And those books too. We can shelve them in 2 rows to save space. I like when there's air and light." Now eye to eye, they had another cup of coffee, and as soon as the next day, the young Zavisha came to help move furniture. They painted the walls freshly white in another day or two, and washed the dusty windows. A bit more scuffling about, and they were able to look around with pride. "Damn, it turned out well," Silisvaff declared, contented. "I'll get to moving now too. Finish off the old place. It's really peaceful here, like I've come home." Good Mistress Nosek gave her boarder her desk, a couch, and a chair, while Silisvaff borrowed a friend's car and brought a raggedy mattress and a big old iron typewriter with clattering keys. He stuffed some other bagfuls of things under the couch, and didn't touch them again. Arda had everything after all, pots and pans, plates, cutlery, bath towels, sheets, and blankets, and many more of all of them than she needed for herself. "Lend me your shovel, I have to clean my rental room. I'll bring it back after." But he forgot and did not bring the shovel back, and Arda reminded him of this every week. It was a metal shovel she used to clean the ash out of the oven. Jesus, all this grousing over a crusty, rusty old shovel. Arda did not ask about rent, and there was no issue there, aside from the kind of surly way she talked constantly about her bills and the electricity and the wood, even though it was 30 centigrade outside. What frigging wood? Yeah, let's see if we need to heat the place. He'd also forgotten his space heater, and Arda was always prodding him for it. How do you just leave a radiator behind? They're expensive. Otherwise, her boarder was a conscientious, polite man in every way. He almost never made a fuss, came out of his room extremely rarely, and showered. Sometimes a knock would be heard on the front door. He could make 2 meals for himself. Either he fried pelmeni in a pan or warmed a pastry in the oven. Every other day or so he put his dirty dishes in the sink, where Arda would wash them and put them back in the cupboard without a word. And Arda always made sure to dry the bathroom floor as soon as he finished using it. She had a terrible fear that rot would set in somewhere under the floor, so she was ready with a rag the moment Solisvath slipped out of the room. She wiped everything dry and left the door open so the steam could get out. Every morning as she was going about the garden, she looked to see if she needed to pick up cigarette butts from under the young man's window. Young Zavisha smoked heavily, but he was a polite person and kept an ashtray outside on the exterior windowsill. But either the wind or something else had knocked it over, and there were always lots of these cigarette butts in the grass somehow. If there was one thing good Mistress Nosek could not tolerate, it was these butts in her garden. The other thing that somewhat troubled Arda was the fact that she absolutely never knew when Solisvath came or went. She didn't bother herself much with where he went or what he was doing, but sometimes he would make his first morning coffee at 7 in the evening, while at others he was up at 6 in the morning or hadn't even gone to bed at all. Having no order or predictability was somewhat confusing for Arda, and she never knew whether there would be a knock on the door at 3 or 5 in the morning, or whether muffled voices or soft music would start to play. Young Zavisha was a polite man, after all, and never ever made noise. Or whether there would suddenly be peace and quiet. Mistress Nosek slept like a bird and had very keen hearing. She heard every swoosh, every quiet step toward the kitchen, the creak of the bathroom door, or the quiet tap of typewriter keys. A month went, and another, and a third, and looking at her housekeeping costs, the good mistress recognised that her expenses had grown. Just waste electricity, toilet paper, coffee, toothpaste, the room, she grumbled quietly to herself. But she did not go complaining about it to anyone. From time to time she did bring up a drawn-out, tearful story about how money is awfully tight, and everything is so expensive. But young Zavisha thought that maybe she should somehow budget better. Things should come out okay anyway. He would certainly make do with his, and it's not like he had big money in his pocket, but it was enough to eat on. Yes, it's enough to eat on, the good mistress conceded with a sigh. For the most part, she bought the little discount boxes set in a corner in the store. She only bought milk and cat food at the regular price, and not the cheapest cat food, but the kind the cat liked. All the same, they basically got along fine, because Solisvath had the rare talent of being very likeable. He got along well with everyone. He was clearly not in the best state of mind, but he never took out his bad mood on Arda, and never once moped or lost his temper. He still had a nice word or a hopeful promise in the bank. Sometimes he even said, "Oi, Arda, you look so nice today," and then pulled on his green trench coat, stuck his hands in his pockets, and walked jauntily out the door. This put Arda in a good mood for several days. Though she didn't look in the mirror much any more, on the 2 mornings after the compliment she stood in front of it and put her hair in a bun. And Solisvath was also more or less content, except for one thing. Arda was always dawdling in the kitchen. Otherwise it might have been quite nice if she'd ever been anywhere else for a moment, but no. Want to make a coffee? Mistress Nosek squats by the stove, grabs the pot out of your hands, sets the water herself, puts sugar in your cup and mixes it for you. Want to throw together a couple of sandwiches? Arda is bent over with her bum in the air washing dishes, and she has a kind of angry expression on her face. Solisvath mostly went to the kitchen at night, when there was at least some hope that he could do things himself. Even still, Arda's sleepy face frequently looked in from the door to see what was going on. Solisvath thought that her nerves seemed out of sorts. One night he'd scared himself blue. A kind of strange, otherworldly whining was coming from somewhere, as if from under the ground, muffled and horrible. "What was that voice?" he murmured, wavering. Later he got used to it, because it turned out that they were Arda's nightmares. "Still, good it's not sleepwalking," Zavisha explained to his friends, smiling broadly and gesturing with his hands. "Wake the old bird up if she shouts," thought one of them. But Zavisha turned serious. "I am not going into Granny's room. That's all I need. People should see to their demons themselves, he answered. Arda's glum mood was perfectly apparent. Especially nasty was her habit of saying nothing and just moping. She was constantly going and picking up cigarette butts from under Solisvaf's window. He did say several times, "I'll do it, I will, I'll clean up, I'll do it." But no. And Arda regularly gobbled up young Zavisha's cheese and sausage. Once Solisvaf did try to bring up the issue, something like, "Leave a couple of slices for me too." But that started a real fight. The number of times Solisvaf had eaten off Arda's table was read out to him. And who buys the coffee? Who pays for it all? Yes, pays for the electricity. When are you finally going to? You live here for free, and now you come to count mouthfuls. Give her however much money you want, still a sourpuss. Damn. Got a free renovation, too. The whole business is really starting to grate on my nerves. Comes sniffing around the room, too. Picks up dust with the smelly rag. For the money you gave me last time, I bought you a white lily, Arda said. She walked outside with her head held high. Solisvaf had already understood that the angrier Arda was, the more work she did, and so it was. The romp of wood sawing picked up from the garden. Zavisha grabbed his green trench coat and trotted off. I'll calm her down with a couple of gentler words, he thought. Chuck her some change, and we're good again. I'm out so much, all the time, basically. She can be content spending time alone, however much she spends. Strange old lady. Still pretty, but she sits at home, goes nowhere, knows no one pretty much. Just spins the days into nights. But the fall-winter was approaching. Arda had sawed as much wood as she had the strength to, racked it nicely, and covered the logs with brick and eternit. She made a fire in the oven in the mornings and guarded the doors and windows jealously, so that they stay shut. She started to show some serious displeasure when Solisvaf still had his window open. At first she spoke angry words alone into the mouth of the oven. Not a single log chopped, not one brought inside, not once done the heating, but he certainly knows how to say, "Very cold day today, huh? You heat it then if it's cold, and keep your window closed." Otherwise, she didn't go into her boarder's room, didn't even peek inside, but she started to check his window regularly to see if it was closed and that his fire was out. "Wastrel," she muttered angrily, bolting the window and shutting his stove. Once Solisvaf came home with a brand-new typewriter under his arm, small, thin, light, with light green keys that almost didn't clunk at all. Its name was Hermes' Baby. "Well, got rich then?" Arda asked, putting the coffee on the fire. "Listen, yeah, went well this time," Solisvaf answered, happily tossing some nice bills around next to the typewriter before pulling a ring of Krakowska sausage out of his pocket. "You might cheer up a bit when you see this monster pile of cash I'm giving you, for before and going forward a bit too." Arda drew the money into a pile and looked at it for some time, saying nothing, as if she didn't quite understand what it was. Then she stuffed the bills under a bowl and said, "Remember where I put it, if I forget myself." The two of them sat then in the kitchen, drank coffee, and Solisvaf talked about this and that. Arda listened and nodded, and straight away washed and dried the dishes. She simply stood there hesitantly for a time, thinking that nothing would come of it if she brought it up. "How long do you still plan to be here?" and so forth. "No, I won't bring it up today." The young man dropped the occasional hint that maybe he'd soon actually go abroad, or go to a friend's summer house, or, if things go well, rent himself a nice room. Things were well enough, weren't they, if he can buy that kind of device for himself, Arda thought. "Where do you get this bailout then?" she finally asked. "You don't want to know," Solisvaf Zavisha threw over his shoulder as he stepped towards his room. "But I invited some friends over tonight. I hope that doesn't bother you. We'll be very quiet. Oh yeah, listen, the water doesn't go down in the bathroom. You don't happen to have that wire rope thing you clear drains with." Although there was no reason for it, the good mistress started to feel that there was a quarrel brewing, that she was in the kitchen when she might be somewhere else, and Solisvaf did once ask if she never went anywhere at all. Arda went to the store, and once a month, but maybe more rarely, she went to the city if she had to go to the doctor. "What do you do all day here at home?" Solisvaf Zavisha asked of Arda Nosek, and Arda felt ashamed that she was old, that she doesn't do anything, and that she has nowhere to go. Solisvaf clipped his moustache in front of the mirror. The sink was full of tiny hairs. He asked Arda for the hairdryer, shook his bangs down to his eyes, pulled his khaki overcoat on, stuck his gigantic brogans onto his feet, thrust his hands into his pockets, and was gone. Around 7 in the morning there was a knock at the outer door. Always clanking around, these night-time bums, she grumbled half audibly and rolled over onto her other side. But she could not go back to sleep. She got up and went into the kitchen to make herself a coffee.